Ajnanan manasopadhehe kartruttvadini chatmani kalpyanten bhugate chandre chalanadiyathambhasaha. Ajnanan manasopadhehe kartruttvadini chatmani kalpyanten bhugate chandre chalanadhiyathambhasaha. Now he continues the same argument. Due to ignorance, ajnanat, which is the ignorance of the self, the agency of action, etc., of the mind are attributed to the self, just as movement, etc., of water to the moon in it. Jalanadi yathambhasaha. So what is the agency of action? The agency of action are, he only mentions the kartrutva. The kartrutva is the doership. But whenever one performs an action, there are two attributes to an action. One is the kartrutva bhavana, and then other is the bhoktrutva bhavana. The bhoktrutva is the attitude or tendency to arrogate the enjoyership also to oneself. So it is the attitude of the doer, the attitude of the enjoyer. It's also important to note that the attitude of the doer belongs to the mind and the attitude of enjoyer belongs to the intellect, which is going to be covered in the next verse. Just little technical, you can just keep in mind, take a note, you know. So what is he saying here? Due to ignorance, again, because of not knowing the nature of the self, not knowing the nature of the Atman, you attribute. Annapurnama, what do you understand, ma?
Due to our ignorance, we don't understand that Atman has nothing to do with our action or any actions in this world. But we think it is only a Sakshi. But because of our ignorance, we think we are doing everything.
Because of ignorance, we attribute the Atman to be the doer.
Sorry. Yes, Guruji.
Isn't it? Now,
Yes,
what is
Guruji.
that sound? There's so much of sound around you.
I'll just one second. I'll take care.
No, it's not for me. It's for you. It might be disturbing you, isn't it?
One second. Yes, Guruji. I'll take care of it. Shriku, switch it off, please. Switch it off. Yes, Guruji.
Yes, no problem.
So because of our ignorance, just like you explained just now, we think we attribute the doership to Atman, but Atman is only a Sakshi.
Yes, Atman has not got involved. It doesn't take the attributes of the mind, isn't it? That's what he's saying, right? Now, for example, the water water takes the attributes of the reflecting medium, isn't it? So the reflection takes the attributes of the reflecting medium. When the sun reflects in a dirty water, the reflection is dirty. The reflection in a disturbed water is disturbed. The reflection in a clear, crystal clear, still water is similar to the reflected medium. Similarly, the Atman appears dull in a dull person. The Atman appears agitated in an agitated person. The Atman appears brilliant in a brilliant person. But the dullness, the disturbedness, and the calmness are not of the Atman, but are attributes of the mind. You've got to differentiate this. But many people will think the sun above has got those attributes. The sun is Amala, as he said in the previous verse, the sun is clear, but because of the reflecting medium, it takes its attributes. But the sun is not disturbed, the sun is not clear, the sun is not dirty. Those are the qualities of the reflecting medium. That's what he's saying here. Due to ignorance, the agency of action, etc., are attributed to the mind. So what is the state of mind? The three states of mind are sattva, rajas, tamas. And these reflect in the performance of action. Isn't it? The action is performed through the mind. So the state of mind determines the state of action. All of this is, again, he's saying, is happening through ignorance of the self. Just as movement, etc., of the water are attributed to the moon. Either you take the moon or the sun, you're attributing it to the water. Of the water to the moon, you're attributing it through ignorance. So gunas are qualities of the mind and not the self. You got to understand that. Yes, Tinky Ma, is it confusing?
Hari Om Guruji.
Yes, Ma.
We've always, in your discourse, you've always explained that the Atman has no attributes, no qualities. So here you said the Atman appears agitated. Why will the Atman appear? We may attribute agitation to the Atman, but it doesn't appear in any way. It is just is. It just is that,
There are two statements, isn't it?
Yeah.
We are saying the moon is pure, immaculate. It's a witness. But the moon appears disturbed in a disturbed surface of water. So when you say appears, it seems to be. It is not true, isn't it?
It's not. That's what.
Therefore, so when you explain this, understand the Atman also the same way. Atman appears to be disturbed through the medium of an agitated mind. It appears, it is not true. But for a person who looks at that agitated state, through the state of agitation, he attributes it to the Atman. All that is because of avivekana, because of ignorance, because of non-discrimination. But when one is endowed with jnanam and viveka, which is discrimination, you separate the qualities from the Atman. You say, this belongs to the mind and not to the Atman. Even though it appears, it is not true. So appearance, so we should not be fooled by the appearance. That is what the message is.
So we generally say, I think mostly we would say, I am agitated, not my mind is agitated. Whereas when I use that statement, now a little bit we started thinking that way. But otherwise, when I say I means everything, body, mind, intellect, whatever, anything relating to me, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I use that word I'm not even thinking about the self or the Atman.
Yes.
So actually, when I say I am agitated, according to Vedanta, according to the Gita, it would mean the self, where actually it doesn't mean the self, it means the mind. My mind is agitated.
Correct, correct.
Because we never
No.
think of the self when we say I. I mean, we never did.
Correct.
Now we're trying to.
Yeah. See, this is you're rightly clarified. This is the principle of, what is the principle that underlies this? Anybody can answer this? The statement which Tinkima has said, what is the principle that underlies this?
The Atman is only, it illumines the body, mind, and intellect, but
Fair
it
enough.
is, but it's not the doer.
Correct. It is not the doer. But when you, going back to the earlier statement, when you said, I am agitated, you attribute, it is the mind that's agitated, but you attribute it to the Atman. But Atman is not. But my question is, what is the principle that underlies this statement? Yes, Seduji?
So we should not identify with our mind, body, and intellect.
Guruji, Pratipaksha Bhavan.
Pratipaksha Bhavana. What is Pratipaksha Bhavana here? Can you explain what that term is for everybody's understanding? What is Pratipaksha Bhavana? You have used the word, therefore I'm asking you to explain. Pratipaksha Bhavana, it is used in the text Bhajagovindam, we use it. Remember? And Pratipaksha Bhavana is the capacity to look at something from a totally different perspective, from a totally different angle or a totally different vision. So how would you connect that to the question? Can you repeat the question, G?
What does this, how do you attribute?
See, the question stemmed from what Tinkima said. She said, when I'm agitated, I don't realize it is not the Atman, it is the mind that's agitated. Even though the mind is agitated, I often attribute agitation to myself. We say, I am agitated.
In this case,
examining the statement, my question is, what is the principle that underlies it?
See, in this case, since I am in ignorance, when I say I always link it to mind. I don't. I am not a realized soul or anything. So I am always talking about mind only when I say I. That is why I say when I am agitated, mind is agitated, but I don't express it that way. So
I might soon start expressing that agitation now.
Principle.
Enna principle, sir. I understand where you're coming from. What is that principle? What is the principle? Ramji is saying something, projection. Sir, Upanishadic masters madri pesreenga neenga. They don't explain themselves. Their words, very few words. Very conservative they are.
No, I'm not so enlightened to confuse everybody. So,
so the more who is confusing, that is the status of his enlightenment.
Yeah, exactly. No,
right,
sorry.
Sir.
But I was saying that projection actually means that what you feel, you think that the other person is reflecting. That means it is a projection of your mind's status on something else. So that becomes a kind of a, I mean, for example, for an agitated person, everything else may look agitated. So you project it that way. Your mind's state will get projected on other things. So here the mind's state is getting projected on the Atman.
Correct. But The statement which Tinkima said, I'm asking the principle underlying it. What's the statement she made?
She said, we think, although it is the mind which is agitated, we think that it is Atman which is agitated. That's what she said, right? Did I say it correctly or not?
Clarify, Tinkima.
So when the mind is agitated, we tend to say, I am agitated. Or even if I have, suppose I have fever, or if I have a throat ache, I don't say my throat is paining. I say I am unwell. I have fever, because we are so identified that I is always the body and the mind. We think of those two things. Or even if it's about using the intellect, we never say that, my intellect seems to have gone to sleep. We just say, I am not thinking. That I is for body, mind, intellect. We don't even think of Atman when we say I. So far, we have not thought of it. Now we need to, little more awareness.
You know,
in fact, she's only, yes, she's only explained the statement further.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, sir, please go ahead.
No, I was going to say something similar but different. That is, in training programs in corporates, we are always drilled into our mind that never say that I don't like so and so. If somebody's behavior has hurt you, don't say that I'm offended by him or I don't like him. You say that I am offended by his behavior, because his behavior is different from him. So this is basically to tell people that the inside of a person, which we may call it as soul or Atman or whatever it is, or the intention. In that case, in the training program, the intention may not be bad. So it is just the outward thing which you should not attribute it to the person, but attribute it only to his actions. I just thought of that as we were discussing this.
Correct. In fact, that context, since you brought it up, in Vedantic terms, we use the quote or the phrase which says, hate the sin, but not the sinner.
Yeah, correct.
You hate the quality, you hate an attribute, but not the person.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Don't brand him to be that and define him by that, which is the mistake we all tend to do at every step of the way, don't we?
Yeah, sure. So here also, can we say that if you see an agitated person, you may you may not like his agitation, but you should not dislike him as a person.
Correct.
Because internally the Atman is pure enough and not agitated.
Correct. So therefore, the quintessential statement, what we are looking at is the next thing is to say is, what are you identifying with?
Yeah.
In any aspect of life, you have the choice. We have the choice to identify. So you are defined by the principle that underlies life, which defines each one of us at every moment of our life, is the principle is identification.
Yeah.
And what's the principle of identification? It is your thinking. And what is the law of thinking? The law of thinking or the law of identification is known as the law of attachment. The law of attachment is, as you think, so you become. So this is what I was trying to get at, which is the law of identification, thinking, attachment. These three are the same thing. And the law of thinking, identification, or attachment is what your thoughts are. As you think, so you become. So at every stage of our lives, we have the choice to identify either with RPG. What are the 5 things? I'm giving you a lead here. I don't usually give these clues, but I'm giving you a little clue here. So what are the 5 things you can choose to identify in every experience? Now he would have had some other answer. Now he has to fit the answer into the 5. This is more difficult. This is more difficult than not giving a cue. Huh?
I remember the 5. I remember the concept of 5. I don't recall the exact 5 items, Guruji. Sorry.
No problem. But you can give 6 also, no problem. We will condense into 5. So in the principle of identification or attachment, what are the things that you can identify with?
I mean, I don't think it's as straightforward an answer as the 5 senses, in terms of relating to that. But I know there's the initial core thing, or the experience, and then there are 4 other elements that I just don't remember what those are, Guruji. Sorry.
No problem. That's fine. That's okay. No problem. Shivaji, any idea? Sir, சொல்லுங்க sir. பேசுங்க.
Body, mind, intellect, ego. We identify with all that.
We always had issues with you. I think your audio has some problem. We always experience it from your end. Maybe it's some bandwidth that you're in. Maybe you have to check, Shivaji, because your voice always is never it gets disrupted. Anyway, but we got your answer and what you said as well. What are the 5 things, the 5 layers or 5 aspects where you can develop an attachment to? Your thoughts can either flow towards the material world. If your thoughts are towards the material world, you develop an attachment to the material world. You can develop an attachment to the physical world. It means the physical body, which is the senses. You can either develop attachment to the mental emotions or to your knowledge, intellectual attachments, or you can develop an attachment to the Atman. So there are 5 avenues you develop an attachment where your thoughts can go: material, physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual. So if you identify with the material layers, you are subjected to the sorrow and suffering. You could have a material loss. As Tinkima said, oh, I've gone through a terrible loss. What you have lost? You have not lost. You have only lost the material. It's the materiality, but since you attribute the materiality to yourself so dearly, material loss is your loss. So you get affected. You become a victim of that material loss or gain. Physical level, you are affected with heat and cold, etc. At the emotional level, the variety of emotions constantly seem to torment us, aren't we? Whether be it praise, whether be it censure, whether be it love or hatred, you are affected when somebody has too much concern to you. You're affected when somebody shows unconcern to you. You're also affected. It bothers you. Why? Because you give so much importance to that emotion. Isn't it? You are identifying too much with the emotional level. And then you can get offended with ideas. Ego is nothing but knowledge, notion of I knowing. You're caught up at the intellectual level. Alas, hardly anybody is attaching himself to the Atman, the spiritual. So the same law applies. If you have invested, maybe there we can seek some advice from RPG, how to invest intelligently into this. RPG, please, boliye, how to do investment here? I thought that's what you said your expertise, isn't it?
Maybe a little bit. So yeah, so I think it's interesting. One thought that entered my mind is that this class is a reminder that we're attached to these layers, right? So going through this exchange, understanding where you have weaknesses, as you think about the going through these layers or sheaths, or I think it's termed as well, you're reminded that you don't know, right, everything, especially at the instant that you're requested to know, right? And so it demands that you, in terms of diversification, in the pursuit of moving through these layers to the self, opening yourself up to different knowledge, opening yourself up to those experiences that lead you to that knowledge, right? And not being so diversified that you feel like, oh, I have to pass through all these other desires to get to, it's a very specific path to getting there, but yet you have to move through the material, the physical, the emotional, intellectual to hit the Atman.
It's not a sense of hierarchy, though. Not in the sense that you have to move from one stage to the other. It's not that. But certainly the material layer is the grossest. Emotions are more subtler than material. Thoughts are more subtle than emotions. And the Atman is the subtlest. But it's not necessary that I have to develop a detachment to the material and then get to the thing. No, it's not that. But only when you have a certain detachment to a certain level, you're not enslaved by it. That's all I could say. You may not give much importance to emotions, but you could give a lot of importance to the physical level, See, it's not as a thumb rule that you must only go in the hierarchical order. Not that way. But as you rightly said, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Is it fair to say, Guruji, that it's the rare individual that doesn't have to evolve through some of these layers, right? That you're not born and you're at the intellectual level, or you only have that layer to contend with, let's say. Forget that it's a hierarchy, but it seems like it's a rare individual. Often the examples given of a Mozart or a Beethoven, right? It's like the day they were born, they knew how to write an opera or whatever piece of music they were trying to construct. But those are rare individuals, right? And so their sole focus was not eating or not partying or not doing whatever, but it was this call, right? And so it seems like it would be rare that we would find an individual that doesn't have to divest of some of these other layers, right? Forget hierarchy, but just divest of these layers.
But why are you excluding by giving that exclusivity to them? Why are you excluding yourself or everybody else? Why I say that is, in the Gita it is said, you're not defined by your vasanas. You're actually defined by your purushartha, which is effort. See, I may have a certain vasana. See, I'm born with it. I realized that I had this innate nature for spirituality at a very young age. I'm very fortunate. I realized it. I could have realized it much later in my life, and then I could have pursued something which is not my nature, not my vasanas. Now, having got that benefit that, yes, I've got into a field which is my dharma, which is my nature, would you say I am what I am because of my sheer nature of vasanas? Can you say that, RPG?
No, I don't think so. And maybe I'm confusing it with what we see today in your you're delivering this to us, and I think we equate you with, we don't understand that there was some force or something that got you here, effort, as you say, right? We only see the end result.
Yeah.
It's before us, right?
Yes.
And so we don't, and kind of going back to Inkima's thinking was, we say I, we say you are whatever the embodiment we see now. We don't think about, unless you tell us, obviously, you started at 16 and you were inspired, or you had this, we see what we see before us, right? And we attribute our perception to that in the now, right?
Yeah, but everything has a cause and effect, doesn't it? I'm
Yes.
just trying to explain the principle which all of us are governed with, and we can choose. So that's why I mentioned that we can choose to identify with any of these layers or any of these avenues and get bound by it and be defined by it. So it's a clear-cut choice. So I can choose to be a materialistic person. I can choose to be a physical person. So if I have a physical perception, whenever I look at a person, I only evaluate him from a physical perspective. The first thing I only see is physicality. I define him by physical personality. Why? Because I only have a physical perception to life. All the time, I'm only looking myself from a physical perspective. But if I have an intellectual perception, I'm constantly looking at you, how intellectual you are. I have that perception. I am bound by that realm because I identify with that. I'm constantly reveling in books and knowledge and ideas and ideologies. If I'm attuned to the Atman, yeah, I'm only attuned to the Atman in you. It doesn't matter what is your material quotient. I'm only interested in your spiritual quotient. This is every moment of our action. We have a choice to identify. These are the options available to us. It's not that it is defined, it's predefined. It's not because of vasanas. I may have a vasana. I can still choose to identify with emotional quotient, or I can choose to identify with the physical quotient. It doesn't make any one of us different. It is all our choices. And we must understand that there is this avenue, and it is this avenue that defines us. And the sheer identification with a particular thing, even though our physical body goes through certain, as she said, if I have fever, I would never ever separate myself from the body and say, it's my body that's suffering, not me. Because I'm not just the body, because I have the material, I have the emotional, intellectual, spiritual, other layers are there. I have to separate this from that. And it is that clear cognition that, yes, this is going through that. That doesn't mean it should affect other. I can go through material loss. It should not affect my spiritual personality. It should not affect my physical personality or my emotional personality. I can be going through a roller coaster in emotions, but it shouldn't affect my spiritual personality. In fact, the spiritual core, the spiritual identification with that layer ensures you remain unaffected when all the other four are affected. The other four can go through fluctuation, but your identification with the spiritual layer ensures you're not affected at all. And that is the real becoming. That is the sadhana. At every juncture, you have the choice. Identify with these four material layers or the spiritual layer in me. And as you think, so you become. And this is moment to moment. It is 24 hours a day, 365 days. And that is known as Ananya Chinta. The very famous words of the Gita. Ananyash Chintayanto Mam Yejana Paryupasate Tesham Nityabhiyuktanam Yoga Kshemam Vahamyam. You will gain the yoga and kshema. You will gain the spiritual union and kshema. You will attain peace and material comfort and happiness only when you inject that spirit of Ananya Chinta. Chinta is thinking. I'm just decoding that word Ananya Chinta. Chinta is thinking. Anya chinta is other thinking. We have too many thinking going on. As the class is going on, I know each of you are thinking so many things. I hope not. Huh? Ananya means no other thinking except the thought which you want to entertain of. And that is known as consistency of purpose. So if you inject that spirit of consistency into the thought, ananya chinta, that level of being with a thought, giving it a channel and let it be with that, that defines you. And all that we have to understand is I have the free will to choose what I want to identify with. Let's say if I have identified, one has identified with the material quotient, and he subjected himself to the material fluctuations, and he realizes the inevitable fluctuations of the material world, and he says, let that be. I will not allow that to affect my physical health nor mental, emotional balance. Is it not rational for one to think that way? I am allowing that material fluctuation to emotionally drain me, physically affect me. It is not only affecting me as an individual, it is affecting the dynamics of me with the family. It is percolating to other aspects of my personality. I start looking at it as, yes, materiality means it will go through the fluctuation of profit and loss. Stock market will go up, will go down. That is its nature. Let me accept it. Let me not identify with it beyond a point where it affects me. I start looking at it objectively to make the right decision so that my investments are safe and sound and they reap the right rewards, but I choose not to get affected. You look at CC, how you have the choice to either, in fact, you are identifying, but yet you are very objective while you're identifying with it. You don't get attached to it. This is the how you can look at it as a abhyasa, as a practice. So what you're doing, you're identifying with the spiritual core, yet you can be a stockbroker. You can be a player heavily playing in the stock market, but you're operating from the spiritual core, not the material layer. You're operating from the spiritual, where you remain unaffected. It's not an intellectual understanding as much, but it is that realizing that yes, it is this much, this very much can happen. So does example resonate, Arpitji?
Yeah, yes, it resonates, and I think through all the study, the faith in what you speak of, right, and even the practical aspect of it has grown, right? I mean, tremendous. And I think the reason we're all here, I think, is to understand how to translate that, what I'll call intellectual understanding or that knowledge. It's very difficult to apply, right? Given all of the competing layers, you know, and that's the personal challenge for me, right? So it's one thing to hear you say it, but then when you start slipping into that out of practice, I'll say that, right? I don't know what the Sanskrit word is for anti-abhyas, right? So, but when you fall out of that practice, right, that's the challenge. You know, here's the ideal, right? It's taken a long time to get there where you say, yeah, this is ideal. It's a whole nother thing to hold on to that, to stay rooted in that, given everything else that's going on. That's the challenge for me personally.
It is a challenge for everyone. You are just voicing out every sadhak's challenge is to ensure that the mahat, anti-abhyas or anti-sadhana is a mahat, the totality seems to influence you. You become a victim of the environment or external factors where you lose that intellectual clarity. It doesn't translate into a sense of objectivity. You get influenced, isn't it? Yeah, and that is only going to change when one does self-introspection. One is the satsangs like this, but second thing is to allow, is as in simple terms, you got to learn to lecture to yourself. It's not listening to lectures from others, but you got to lecture to yourself. And you got to learn to bend the mind, break the mind, a willingness to not budge to that mind, not fall a prey to the mind. And if there is that incessant effort, an incessant thought coming from within, that is the real thing. And satsang like this is only going to reinforce that, and it's meant to only reinforce. But unless until that is done, I tell you, this is going to become a very mechanical, stale exercise if you don't do that. This will inspire you if you do that. I'm saying again, this will only mean something to you if you are a sadhak, if you do your sadhana. Otherwise, the information will become soon very stale very soon. It will not inspire you, not draw you towards it. That's important. And that's what I say, the sadhana is that early hours. Please don't get up at our time. It will be odd time for you. Get up at your time, 4:30 in the morning. RPG, you only said get 4 o'clock. Yeah, I'm only following your time and I'm doing something at odd hour. It will become, huh? Okay. That pratasmarami, that brahma muhurtam, that early morning study ought to be done. That's the real crux. Everything else is just, you may not be sound at these technical concepts, never mind. But as long as you do that, that inner reflection is all that matters. You start seeing that. Little while ago, there was that beautiful light which was shining through the window, RPG. So you will see that real ray of light, the real wisdom shining through. All right. Thinking, ma? You know, one of the most powerful statements which really hit hard, and somebody known to us was very many years ago, I'm saying more than 20 years ago, or maybe 15, 20 years ago, yeah. He was coming to Secunderabad, to Hyderabad via train, caught a train and was coming. And he was with the family, I think from Chennai or somewhere. He was coming from Chennai to Hyderabad. And just before the train departed, moments before, he collapsed because of heart attack and he died. And the family came along with the body to Hyderabad. Look at that language. The person who was traveling along with the family, coming back home after a holiday, when the communication was, it's not we are coming, yes, we are coming with the body. Correct, Rajima. The person becomes the body. It is such an innocuous experience. And I remember overhearing this conversation with the family conversing, and it struck so hard in my mind. What value you're giving to this body? Am I this body? Am I this? And it doesn't take long to become that. How long does it take? No guarantee. Nalini dalagata jalamati taralam, he says. Life is like a drop of water on lotus leaf. Never know when it's going to go. So to operate, and the highest level of thought is, I am not the BMI, I am the self. I'm not the body. I'm not the mind. I'm not the intellect. I am that Atman, the self. This is the most quintessential, profound thought you can hold on to and operate with the body, mind, intellect. You can't but operate. But right through, you will say, I have got nothing to do with it. I am not this. Isn't this the invocation? Ravindraji, is it possible to have the invocation, please?
Sure, sir. Give me 1 second. I'll get it.
Thank you. If not for Ravindraji, I believe, I tell you, will be impossible. Okay, let's chant once again and then you read the translation, what it means. Pratasmarami hridi samsfuradaatmatattvam Satchit sukham paramaham sagatim turiyam Yat swapna jagara sushuptamaveti nityam Tad brahma nishkalamaham nacha bhuta sangha Pratasmarami hridi samsfuradaatmatattvam. In the early morning, I contemplate upon the Atman, the essential self shining in the heart, which is Satchit Sukham Paramahamsa Gatim Turiyam, which is existence, knowledge, bliss, Paramahamsa Gatim. It is the supreme goal. Turiyam, it is the fourth plane of consciousness, not the waking dream, deep sleep. It is the fourth plane of consciousness. Yat swapna jagara sushupta vaitinityam, which constantly illumines the waking, dream, and deep sleep states. Nityam constantly illumines. And the quintessential statement, Tad Brahma Nishkalamaham Nachabhuta Sangha. I am that indivisible Brahman and not this mere assemblage of elements. Nachabhuta Sangha. So even before you embark on the study, you are invoking that thought to say, I am that self. I'm not this individual assemblage of elements. Look at the power of the thought, of the prayer. Everything is thought, isn't it? Everything is sankalpa. It's the power of the thought. And if you are able to imbibe this, instill this seed in the early morning, rest of the day resonates with that thought of the self. It becomes an insulating layer from you to the world. Nothing will reach you because you already asserted and instilled and drilled that thought. Tad Brahma Nishkalamaham Nachabhuta Sangha. Tad Brahma, I am that Brahman. My God, such a profound thought. So profound. And all of this someday will announce to the world, Aham Brahmasmi. I am that Brahman. That is the ultimate end where you and I have to experience and announce it to the world. I am that Brahman. It's all a subjective journey. And all I can say is you can make it happen for yourself. You have the choice, you have the potential. All right.